leave for summer vacation to overcome the heat wave? Where do Korean people leave for summer vacation, and how much do they spend? The Park Geun-hye administration's new economic team releases economic policy directions for the second half. What are the key contents of the policy and its expected impact? We can overcome the summer heat by just choosing the right clothes? What are the core principles of functional summer fibers? Accessories maximize smart device functions. How can we use mobile devices in more interesting and diversified ways using accessories? North Korea and Japan, which had been hostile toward each other on distortion of history and nuclear issues, have become much closer recently. What are their motives behind this?
Hi, my name is Jeff Kane, and I'll be your host this week for Bizline, standing in for Andy Salmon. As you know, July and August are the hottest time of the year in Korea, and many Koreans go overseas for vacation. Some stay in the country. So how much money do Koreans spend on their summer vacation? Let's find out.
August is the hottest month in Korea. Koreans are taking vacations now, leaving for the mountains and the beaches. What sort of vacations do Korean people enjoy the most, and how much do they spend? This is a highway rest area in Gyeonggi-do province. Although it is a weekday, its parking lot is packed with cars. Wearing comfortable shorts, slippers, and sunglasses, most of the people look like tourists going on summer vacation.
여름철을 맞아서 가족들이랑 특별한 휴가를 보내려고 전라도 지역에 있는 전주랑 진안으로 가고 있습니다, 지금. 거기에 이제 홍삼을 테마로 한 스파가 있는데 거기가 굉장히 유명하다고 해서 지금 그쪽으로 가는 길입니다.
Summer in Korea is usually from June to August. It frequently rains in the rainy season from June to early July, so people prefer not to take vacations during this period. The typical summer vacation time in Korea is from late July to early August, when schools are closed for summer break and the summer heat reaches its peak. All the vacation spots are crowded with people.
가족들하고 오니까 너무너무 마음이 즐겁고 모든 거를 다 벗어난 느낌이 들어서 행복해요.
A survey on summer vacation spots showed that 92.3% of the surveyed people plan to take domestic trips, while 7.7% plan to take overseas trips. In case of overseas trips, the percentage increased by about 1.3 percentage points from last year and about 3 percentage points from 10 years ago. Like this, the number of overseas travelers is rising each year. About 90,000 people are expected to leave the country per day during the summer vacation season just this year.
딸이 유치원 여름방학도 하고 휴가철이고 해서요. 좋은 추억 만들려고 일본으로 여행 가고 있어요.
But we can't enjoy summer holidays for free. We need to spend a lot of money for accommodations, transportation, and food. How much do Koreans spend for their summer vacations?
휴가비용 40, 50만 원 정도 예상하고 있습니다. 펜션이 한 2, 30만 원 하는 것 같아요. 그래서 그게 제일 많이 들어가고요. 그다음 식비 그 정도 들어갑니다.
According to a survey, a Korean household will spend an average of 618,000 Korean won, or about $602.63 for taking a domestic trip during summer vacation this year. This is about $50 higher than last year's 569,000 won, or $554.85. A Korean household plans to spend about $4,261 for taking vacations overseas, also up about $500 from last year. Why did the expenses for domestic and overseas trips increase? First, in case of overseas trips, it is partly because of the US dollar's recent fall against the Korean won.
네, 지금 푸켓으로 여행 가는 거고요. 그러니까 전에보다 환율이 많이 좀 내려가지고 뭐 국내 여행 가는 거나 해외 여행 가는 건 큰 차이를 못 느껴가지고 해외로 가게 됐습니다.
Summer vacation is just a spare time, so it is largely affected by economic conditions. So, can we interpret the increase in vacation expenses and the number of people taking overseas trips this year as an improvement in Korea's economic conditions? The travel industry sees the increased spending on vacations as a sign of an economic recovery.
예전에 저희가 경기가 안 좋았을 경우엔 사실상 이 주변 국가, 우리 대한민국에 있는 주변 국가 쪽을 많이 이용을 했었는데요. 경기가 좋아지다 보니까 이제 아무래도 역시 이제 환율도 이제 많이 떨어지고 이제 경기도 많이 좋아졌고, 그러면서 이제 여행객들이 예전에 가보지 못했던 고급 휴양지라든지 그다음에 그 유럽 쪽이라든지 그쪽으로 많이 이동하는 편입니다.
Some analysts say it is natural for vacation expenses to rise this year because people spent so little on vacations last year amid the poor domestic economy. They say it is also partly because recent rise in prices of vacation food, including beef and pork, pushed up by vacation expenses. The point is that the longer people take summer vacations and the more money they spend, the more positive of an impact it will have on the domestic economy.
2013년 작년이죠. 한 해만 우리가 분석을 해보면 그때 이제 내수 경기가 상당히 좀 안 좋았었고요. 그래서 여름 휴가객이 많이 줄었었는데 그 영향으로 분석해 보면 이제 생산 감소분이 한 6천억 원, 그리고 부가가치 감소분이 한 3천억 원, 고용도 그에 따라서 한 3천 명 정도 우리가 좀 손해를 본 것으로 그렇게 추정이 되고 있고, 여름 휴가객이 적으면 적을수록 어떤 생산 활동이 많이 좀 위축되는 그런 모습을 좀 보였습니다.
The number of people traveling abroad is increasing, but the majority of people are still choosing to travel within Korea to spend their summer vacation. When you look at the household consumption data, consumers spend the second largest amount of money in the third quarter after the first quarter, likely because of summer vacation. In this way, vacations take up a large portion of our consumption. Therefore, summer vacations has a big impact on the domestic economy.
여름 휴가는 이제 보통 가계 소비 지출을 동반하기 때문에 내수 진작에 큰 영향을 미치고요. 그리고 이제 보통 이제 휴가지들이 수도권이 아니고 이제 주로 지방에 분산돼 있기 때문에 지역 경제 활성화에 크게 도움을 미칩니다.
It is obvious that people will spend more money for summer vacations this year, despite mixed views on its reasons. We will have to wait and see if this is a signal of an economic recovery, and at the same time watch to see how much this will help boost the domestic economy.
On July 24th, the administration of President Park Geun-hye unveiled its new economic plan for the second half of the year. The massive stimulus package is valued at 41 trillion won and is hoped to at least improve the economy. It's also run by her second economic team. Today we're joined by Dr. SHIN Se-don, who is a professor of economics at Sookmyung Women's University, who's going to tell us a bit about what this policy means and what we can expect from it for the rest of the year. Professor, thank you for being with us.
Always privileged to be here.
So to begin, I want to ask you a little bit about the people behind this new economic team. We've identified two big players. For one, there's the new Deputy Prime Minister Choi Kyung-hwan, who is also a former Saenuri Party floor leader. So he's quite a political heavyweight.
Right.
We also have another figure, An Jong-bom, who is the new presidential secretary for the economy, and he's also a former lawmaker at the in the ruling party. What do you make of this? What do you make of these political heavyweights being appointed to this economic team?
Well, you have to understand the first economic team, the Deputy Prime Minister Hyun Oh-seok, and most of the team members of the previous team was bureaucrats. And there has been many criticisms, incapacity or inability to control real economy. So that was, I think, the underpinning, the philosophy that the president changed to team to the politicians. But actually, Mr. Choi and Mr. An, they have been politicians in the Congress for a couple of terms, but mostly I think they are academics. So I think, it might be proper for them to be called the politicians, but at the same time, very competent scholars.
So in the new economic stimulus plan, what do you think are the most important points, at least for the coming year in Korea?
Two, I think the fortunate thing is, unlike the previous team, they changed economic forecast. The previous team always emphasized, Korean economy is experiencing very rapid recovery, and always they talk about the recovery, but actually the case was not the true, So I think, one thing that fortunate for the second team is they had a correct economic outlook for the coming year. That's, I think, a fortunate thing. And second thing is, if you look at the new measures, they are heavily tilted to construction kind of, measures, in the sense that they have a substantial portion of the money. You mentioned about 41 trillion. Substantial portion of it is directed to the infra investments, such as highways, and building houses for the poor. And so those kind of construction, maybe industry could be beneficial or beneficiary of the new policies. But in general, I think we have a lot of rooms for the new team to improve economic performances down the road.
Do you think that improving the construction industry or improving infrastructure, will that lead to greater success in this economic policy? Do you think that that's a fair target?
I think that's pretty, short-sighted, very short-term. Would have a short-term effect in heightening economic growth rate. But in general, I have a pretty big doubt whether entire program of the second team would be successful probably next year or down a year before. So I think I'm pretty skeptical. It may have some short-term effect, but generally I don't expect that has a permanent effect on economic growth, because we have a severe structural problems, and he mentioned that structural problems, but actual measures were not quite pertinent to structural problems. The main focus of the new policies were directed to investment in the infrastructure.
What about the lack of a supplementary budget? What do you make of that, considering this is a $41 trillion stimulus and the government has had supplementary budgets before?
Previous year, yeah. But last year we had about 23 trillion supplementary budget, and comparing to that, 41 or 42 trillion is a pretty significant amount. But I think there are legal trouble for this team to implement the supplementary budget, because the supplementary budget has to satisfy certain requirements specified by the law, and it is too late. And the current team, I think, was skeptical whether the opposing party would be helping to implementation of the supplementary budget. So I think they chose not to take the path of the supplementary budget and actually depended upon the fiscal plans.
Do you think that lending money through state financial bodies without a supplementary budget would have limitations in terms of boosting household consumption?
The total size of the financing through the public financial institutions are about 28 trillion won. And if you look at each items of that, the finances, most of them are provided by the KDB or IBK, those public institutions, public financial institutions, and they have been supplying that funds, for this year, entire size of that is 181 trillion before this, the policy change. So now it is changed to 191 trillion. So there is an increase in 10 trillion in the financial loans by the public entities, and would have some effect on the investment by the small and in SMEs and some economic entities. But as I said, it is changed from 181 to 191, so about less than 5%, about 5% increase. So would that have a significant amount in the economic growth? Well, very limited, I think. 10 trillion seems to be big, but compared to the entire size, it's about 1/20th, right? So I think, of course, the government is trying to do something. Well, in that sense, we could appreciate that, but the size, 10 trillion, is not as significant as it first appears.
You did mention SMEs. Could this be a lot of money for them? I mean, would this be especially helpful for smaller enterprises, and would that really benefit the Korean economy? Right.
That is one of the philosophy of the second team, because they focus upon not the big companies, the conglomerates. They focus upon SMEs. So there are a number of projects in this kind of a policy package to help SMEs. So one of that is 2.4 trillion won directed to SMEs, and you could find many other policy measures. So I think definitely SME could be very helpful with this kind of support. So that is one of the good things, of this new government.
One of the points that stands out in this new economic plan is the government's carrot and stick policy with Korean companies. So right now the Korean government says that it's going to give tax breaks or tax benefits to companies that hire more, or that either hire more workers or raise their wages. Whereas for those that sit on their cash piles and don't invest it, they might face some sort of tax penalty or higher prices. Do you think that will lead to a sort of boost in household income and therefore consumption over time?
Well, there are two things, right? The one is, the government want to encourage wage increase. So they want to penalize the companies who are very reluctant to raise wages, and the kind of the tax incentive to the companies who raises wages very rapidly. So that is a good thing. I think that's why he mentioned it. This is, quote, untrodden path, unquote, right? So in that respect, pretty fascinating item. But in reality, would that be quite effective? That's another story. So ideas pretty good. Wage increase is really crucial for boosting domestic demand, because people has to have a lot of money to spend on. So that's a good idea, but actually whether that could be pretty effective, that's another question we have to see. How many, the tax exemption is just 10%. Okay, so I think that the size of the incentives are pretty small. That was one thing. Another one is about the government decision to levy tax upon the cash reserves, right? And there has been many studies whether they could be pretty effective. And one newspaper researched whether that could be pretty effective, and they found in 5 major companies in Korea: Hyundai Motor, and the Samsung, SK, POSCO, and the Hyundai Heavy Industry. Those 5 cases, they ended up the entire tax for the cash was about 50 billion won total. So and the Hyundai Motor Corporations, because they have to invest a lot in plant, and also POSCO, by nature of the company, they have to invest a lot in plant investment. So they are excluded that penalty, even though they have a lot of cash reserves. Just only Samsung, Hyundai Heavies, and SK, and entire, tax for that, the cash reserves is about 50 billion. So that was based upon the figure for 2011, in which the performances of the corporations are pretty good. So now every company is having difficulties in revenues, right? So when that kind of plan was implemented to in 2014 or 2015, actual penalties for that big companies would be pretty negligible. So many criticisms say that idea may be good, but counterintuitive or counter-capitalism, idea. And that's one thing. Another one is the actual size of that, penalty is not as significant as, the team might expect. So in general, I say, well, idea pretty novel, but the effect questionable.
So how will the stimulus impact key interest rates?
Well, the interest rate is within the territory of the Bank of Korea. And the Bank of Korea has its own philosophy and principle regarding interest rate policy. And of course, there are many, pressures, so to speak, to lower the base rate. But if you look at the situations, there are also, some aspects that the Korean base rate could not be lowered. First, the gap between the interest rate gap between the Korean and the United States or UK, the government bonds, it's about 1.5%. So if Korean base rate is lowered, maybe a quarter percentage or even at half, the gap between the Korean rate and the United States or United Kingdom will be significantly reduced. That's one thing. So there will be a significant outflow of funds from Korean financial market. And another thing is, there's a pretty high chance that United States will raise their federal funds rate maybe within this year or maybe early next year. So in that case, the gap between Korea and the United States will be even further, reduced. And another thing is, if Korean rate is lowered, okay, and the capital, is moving outside Korea, then there's a significant increase in the Korean exchange rate, right? That's going to induce another, a disadvantage for foreign investors into Korea market. So first, lowering the Korean rate and coupled with, raising the United States and exchange rate movement, it's going to be very difficult task for Korean financial market to deal with. So I think considering that, okay, I think there's a little room for lower the rate. A second point is, the first quarter growth rate is 3.9%, and the second quarter 3.7%. So there's a 1/5 of a percentage decline, all right? And economically, that decline is not, as serious as the Bank of Korea to lower the base rate. There has no history of, so sensitive, movement to small change in economic growth rate. So I think, the Bank of Korea should stay on the current track and see if, economy is even getting worse, maybe third quarter or in the last quarter. So in that case, I think the government, the Bank of Korea might decide to lower, but at this stage, too early to lower the rate. That is my point. But the Bank of Korea, I don't know.
So, Professor Shin, what do you think some of the big challenges are going to be later this year and early next year for the Korean economy?
In Korea, most important thing in economy is export. And if you look at the numbers, the growth rate of exports has been coming down significantly for the last 2 years. And the first half of this year, the growth rate is less than 3%, 2.5%. And actually, the government projected that to be more than 6.5%, and it is less than 3%. So, you remember that won has been strong, very strong for the last, year. And the yen has been very weak, for the last 2 years. So coupled with that, we're going to have a serious trouble in exports, and I expect that maybe the latter half of this year, export growth rate may go into the negative, right? And maybe even worse in the next year, first half of next year. So I think the most important challenge for the coming year, I think, is the export performance. And now the government is, too much, looking into the demand side, the domestic demand, and negligent about the export. That will be the I think single most challenge, for the Korean economy down the road. Yeah.
Dr. SHIN Se-don, it's a pleasure to have you here at Sookmyung Women's University. Thank you for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Great.
Do you love to sing and dance? How about going to the karaoke? Then what would you do about your dreams of becoming a K-pop singer? This week's app of the week is Budogo, that enables users to prepare for a singing audition. First, choose the song you are confident of singing and show off your singing skills to the recorded music. If you have practiced sufficiently, go ahead and film an audition video to show your talent on camera. Then, choose the talent agency or record label you want to apply to and upload the audition video. If you are good enough, you can achieve your dream of becoming a great singer.
So for those of you who haven't left for the summer vacation, how do you get through this heat? You might be trying a cold beer right now, or maybe even having patbingsu, which is a Korean dessert that consists of ice flakes and syrup. Or maybe even samgaetang, which is also popular in the summer. That's a Korean chicken soup. It's quite healthy. But did you know that you could get through this heat if you just changed the type of cloth you wore to something new, something that scientists have been developing? Let's take a look at functional summer fabrics.
The hottest agenda for businesses targeting the 2014 summer market is none other than how to stay cool. Especially in the fashion industry, businesses are concentrating on making clothes with functional fibers to stay cool in summer. Let's take a look into the secret behind staying cool under the scorching summer heat. It isn't easy to stay cool in the summer heat, especially for those out in the sun for outdoor activities. Outdoor apparel brands have introduced functional clothing to help people stay cool, and they are being welcomed by consumers.
아웃도어로는 지금 계속 여름이다 보니까 빨리 마르거나 빨리 흡수되는 그 의류가 많이 판매되고 있고요. 캠핑 시즌이다 보니까 갑작스럽게 비가 오게 되면 방수가 잘 되는 자켓류가 많이 판매되고 있습니다.
So what is the difference between regular fibers and functional fibers made especially for summer?
여름철 기능성 섬이라 하면 아무래도 그 무더위를 견딜 수 있는 그러한 또 그리고 의류 제품을 착용했을 때 착용자가 쾌적감을 느낄 수 있는 그러한 제품을 의미합니다. 보통 일반적으로 알려져 있는 것은 냉감 기능을 가진 섬유와 그리고 흡판 속건 기능을 가진 섬유들이 대표적이라고 볼 수가 있고 또 여름철 그 자외선을 차단할 수 있는 자외선 차단 기능을 가진 섬유들도 소개가 되고 있습니다.
A Korean company in the forefront of the domestic textile industry is leading efforts to develop functional fiber to help endure the summer heat. Most functional fibers developed so far focused on drying quickly after absorbing sweat or moisture in order to provide cool and refreshing feelings.
흡판 속건 소재인 쿨론은 일반 원형 단면 원사와 달리 이처럼 더블 크로스형 특수 2형 당면을 가지고 있는 특수 소재입니다. 이 소재는 일반 원사 대비 넓은 표면적과 모세관 현상을 이용하여 빠른 흡수와 건조 성능을 발휘하는 흡판 속건 기능을 극대화시킨 기능성 소재입니다.
This fabric is made with threads with multi-sides. Its quick absorbing and fast drying function is maximized through capillary action, which works to give a refreshed feeling. So, what is capillary action?
모세관 현상이란 액체가 작은 관이나 통로를 따라 올라가거나 내려가는 현상을 말하는데 이 특징은 관의 개수가 많을수록 관의 크기가 작을수록 높아지는 현상을 보입니다. 이러한 모세관 채널이 몸 안의 땀을 빠르게 흡수하고 우리의 바깥층으로 빠르게 이동시키는 동시에 확산시켜 줌으로써 높은 흡수력과 빠른 건조 기능을 가지게 되는 것입니다.
Tests on quick absorbing and fast drying fabrics show that it absorbs twice as fast than a regular fabric, while it dries more than 2.5 times quicker. There is even a technology that can transform sweat into a cooling energy to lower the temperature of a fabric. Cool feeling through absorbing moisture occurs through the diffusion of cool feeling agents processed on fiber as it absorbs heat.
흡습 냉각 기술은 흡열 반응의 메커니즘을 활용한 방식으로 제품에 부과된 가공 약재가 땀이나 외부 수분과 반응하여서 의복의 온도를 낮춰주는 가공 기술입니다.
After melting 1 gram of erythritol, which is a processing agent for cooling, in 10 grams of water, temperature of the dissolved water was about 4 degrees lower than regular water. Such cooling agents are coated on the fiber in nanoparticle-sized capsules to give that cool feeling effect. Thermographic camera tests show that its effects can be easily distinguished.
이런 흡습 냉각 기능성 첨가제는 다양한 가공제와 혼합하여 마이크로 캡슐의 형태로 원단에 적용이 됩니다. 마이크로 캡슐은 나노 사이즈의 크기로 에멀전 내부에 수용성의 기능성 첨가제를 넣은 특수한 캡슐 입자의 형태로 존재하고 있는데 섬유 조직 내부에 깊숙이 침투하여서 잦은 세탁에서도 충분한 내구성을 보유할 수 있게끔 후처리하는 가공 기술입니다.
This cool-feeling fiber is made of specially coated thread for UV protection, which helps to feel cool temporarily. A test on wavelength of light showed that penetration rates of UV rays, which are harmful to human skin, and visible radiation of fiber with cool effect were about 2 percentage points lower respectively than regular fibers. Such results indicate that the cool-feeling fiber has the effect of lowering temperature by 2 to 3 degrees when compared with regular fibers.
이런 냉각 가공 처리 제품의 효과는 사용하는 환경과 착용자의 주관적인 판단이 매우 중요한 부분이라 구체적인 성능에 대한 수치를 정의하기는 좀 어렵습니다. 다만 동일 온도 조건에서 유사 태양광을 2시간 동안 조사하여 온도의 차이를 측정해 본 결과 처리 전후의 온도 변화가 1도 이상 지속적으로 발생하여 쾌적성을 충분히 느낄 수 있는 의복 제품이라고 할 수 있습니다.
Advanced textile industry in the world is led by Japan and Italy. However, Korea is increasing its presence in the market through special technologies which make it stand out.
섬유가 단순히 냉감 기능이나 흡한 속건의 기능을 갖는 것 외에 주위 환경 조건에 따라서 스스로 섬유의 기능을 제어할 수 있는 그런 기술까지 개발이 되고 있습니다. 그래서 앞으로 지구 온난화 현상이라든지 또는 극한이나 극소 현상들이 발생했을 때에도 우리가 의복을 통해서 그런 기후에 적응하고 환경에 적응할 수 있는 그런 제품을 만들어야 되기 때문에 인지 기능을 가진 그래서 감성공학과 센서공학이 결합된 그러한 융합 기술의 섬유 제품들이 개발될 것으로 그렇게 기대하고 있습니다.
The hot and sweaty summer. Developments of various cool-feeling functional fibers and their applications on clothes have helped to widen consumer choices. Technology on functional fiber is constantly evolving, which will help to make the summer heat more bearable in the future.
Have you ever heard of an accessory? An accessory is a word that combines an application and an accessory. You can use it on your smartphone or tablet. So what kinds of accessories are out there that make life easier and more fun? Let's take a look.
Smartphones and other mobile devices are testing limits on jobs they can handle thanks to the introduction of accessories. Accessory is a new term combining the words application and accessory to describe an application in a mobile device that activates something in the physical world, and it's making mobile devices smarter. LG Electronics Best Shop, a store selling home appliances in an area of Seoul where people gather. The accessory corner is the most popular at the store. Among those who love to take pictures with smartphones, they would love to have this pocket photo. It's the world's smallest mobile printer that can fit into your pocket, and it prints out colorful photos, which is a must-have for people taking selfies.
스마트폰으로 원하는 사진을 쉽고 저렴하게 인화할 수 있습니다. 특히 추억을 간직하고 싶은 연인들이나 아이들의 성장 사진을 간직하고 싶은 부모님들께서 많이 찾으십니다.
Pocket Photo can quickly and easily print out photos sent from a smartphone or tablet PC through NFC or Bluetooth. It has an application that allows one to put a message on the photo as well as photo editing before printing it out for personal possession.
지난 6월 기준으로 국내 판매 50만 대를 돌파했으며 현재 대만, 일본, 싱가포르 등과 같은 해외 시장에서도 꾸준한 인기몰이를 하고 있습니다.
With the growth of businesses stemming from smartphones, the market for accessories, which links the application and enhances the function of a smartphone, is drawing much attention.
미국 시장 기준으로만 봐도 한화로 한 2.5조 원 정도의 시장 규모를 갖고 있고 그 이상도 성장을 할 수 있다고 보고 있고요. 스마트폰 액세서리로서도 이제 그 규모가 점점 커지고 있지만 스마트폰 이외에도 여러 가지 하드웨어, 즉 뭐 웨어러블 같은 기기도 지금 등장을 하고 있기 때문에 그 웨어러블 기기에 적합한 액세서리 같은 것들도 많이 등장하고 많이 개발이 된다면 실제로 우리가 전망하고 있는 수치보다는 훨씬 더 상회하는 수준의 시장이 좀 더 활성화될 것으로 보고 있습니다.
The National IT Industry Promotion Agency in Korea is expecting the smart wireless accessory output in the world to exceed 210 million items in 2018 from 44.4 million this year. An online community for mobile users, Citizen, surveyed 1,400 users of accessories to see whether they were deemed useful. The results showed that more than 70% were approving of accessories. The accessory market is one of interest to mobile carriers as well, and SK Telecom has introduced a variety of accessories. One of those is an ultra-small portable beam projector, Smart Beam. It has become a must-have item on a camping trip or for outside activities for people who want to see what's on the smartphone screen projected to a bigger screen.
가로 세로 높이 4.5cm 크기 안에 입방체에 이제 빔 프로젝터를 집어넣은 제품이고요. 이제 그 작은 크기에서도 최대 100인치까지 영사가 가능하기 때문에 이제 휴대가 간편하고 저녁에도 이렇게 아이들이 이제 뭐 영화를 본다든가 아니면 캠핑에서도 많이 쓰는 제품이 되고 있습니다.
It is convenient to carry and easy to use with a smartphone, being compatible to play any type of video, regardless of size or codec, so people enjoy contents on the smartphone projected to a big screen.
제품을 작게 만드는 게 가장 중요했습니다. 갖고 다니기 편하셔야 되기 때문에 고객분들의 편의성을 최대한 먼저 생각을 했고요. 또 다양한 스마트폰에 적용할 수 있어야 되기 때문에 이제 그러한 연결 부분에서 이제 고객들이 편리하게 사용할 수 있게 관리를 많이 했습니다.
Smart robots that use smartphones as their brain have also gained recognition in the global market. Albert and Ati are popular educational robots, grabbing children's attention with their cute appearances and opening up parents' wallets by offering various educational functions.
스마트 로봇은 이제 유아에서 초등학교 저학년들, 학생들을 대상으로 만든 교육용 로봇인데요. 일단은 다양한 어학 컨텐츠들을 활용해서 이제 영어나 중국어 공부를 할 수 있게 만들어져 있고, 그리고 스마트 로봇 같은 경우는 이제 동작이 중요하기 때문에 이제 모션 센서들이 많이 적용되어 있고요. 그래서 그런 기술들을 바탕으로 해서 이제 아이들이 커뮤니케이션 할 수 있는 그런 부분을 많이 강조를 했습니다.
By loading a smartphone with educational applications, the robot becomes an academic tutor. Ati is a follow-up model with improvements made in multimedia education and upgraded functions in voice recognition and other sensors to add fun in learning. It is equipped with an optical character recognition system and can be linked to a smart pen and proximity sensor. Various devices such as stereos, cameras, robots, and beam projectors have been transformed to become more useful accessories through their encounter with smart devices. However, there are still necessary efforts to be made for the development of a wider variety of accessories in the future.
저변이 확산이 되기 위해서는 일단 액세서리 기술이라든지 모듈이 한번 개발이 되면 그것이 좀 더 다른 이제 개발자들과 공유할 수 있는 그런 장이 좀 마련이 되어야 될 것 같고, 운영체제도 점차 좀 파편화되고, 더군다나 웨어러블에 특화된 어떤 운영체제들도 지금 나오고 있기 때문에 그런 다양한 운영체제들에 연동될 수 있는 그런 개방형 생태계가 좀 더 우선적으로 구축이 돼야 된다고 말씀드릴 수 있겠습니다.
A new niche industry in the era of information and communications technology. The hottest keyword to live smart is accessory. There's no limit on what mobile devices can do with their presence.
Japan and North Korea have never really gotten along. North Korea has always criticized Japan's views of history, while Japan has been hostile towards North Korea's nuclear weapons program. But recently, the two countries struck a deal. North Korea says it'll reopen an investigation into the supposed abductions of Japanese citizens decades ago. Japan, on the other hand, says that it'll relax sanctions against the Hermit Kingdom. But what are the real reasons behind this thaw? What does each country stand to gain? Let's find out.
At the start of July, North Korea and Japan resumed foreign ministerial talks in Beijing to discuss details on how North Korea will carry out a new probe into Japanese citizens kidnapped by North Koreans decades ago. The breakthrough, which the two sides hinted could lead to normalization of diplomatic ties, came as a surprise, as Japan has been referred as enemy of state by North Korea, which remained bitter about past Japanese colonization and accusation about kidnappings. In 2002, North Korea partly admitted to the abduction of Japanese citizens, of which 5 were returned home when Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi visited Pyongyang.
당시에 2002년 10월 15일에는 어떤 데라코시 다케시나 또는 소가 히토미 등의 5인을 일본에 일시 귀국을 허용했는데요. 일본 측이 이들을 영구 체류시켰고요. 북측은 이러한 임시 방문 기간을 일본이 무한 연장한 데 대해서 항의하면서 5명에 대한 평양의 재송환을 주장을 했었습니다. 이후에 2004년부터는 이제 고이즈미 재방북을 통해서 김정일 위원장이 다시 납치 피해자의 재조사할 것을 이렇게 약속하면서 새로운 국면을 맞게 됐는데요.
Japan has been pressing for more returns, as it officially recognizes 17 had been kidnapped by North Korea. But Pyongyang claimed it as a closed case, insisting that it has returned all those who it can verify. In May, it came up with the card once again, with more planned details on the offer and demand this time. North Korea and Japan formally reached a new deal for the first time in more than a decade.
일본의 납북자 문제는 북일 관계 개선에서 가장 큰 걸림돌로 그동안 작용을 해왔습니다. 이번에 그 북일이 납북자 문제 해결을 하기로 이제 합의를 보았다는 것은 양국 사이에 존재하는 가장 큰 걸림돌 해소를 위해서 첫 발을 내딛었다는 점에서 북일 관계 개선에 큰 의미가 있다고 볼 수 있겠습니다.
What has suddenly led up to the change of air between North Korea and Japan that have remained hostile for more than half a century?
북한도 그렇고 일본도 이 양국 간의 어떤 새로운 관계를 개선하는 그 목적 중에 하나는 자국의 이익을 극대화하겠다는 지극히 이제 현실적인 그런 입장이 반영된 것이기 때문에 한편으로는 비난하고 또 한편으로는 대화하는 이런 국제 정치의 어떤 초보적인 아주 원초적인 그런 그 방식을 양국이 다 취하고 있다 이렇게 봅니다.
North Korea had been vehement against Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's reinterpretation of pacifist constitution to reclaim collective self-defense rights that would allow Japan to use military force it had voluntarily forsaken after the war. North Korea is particularly touchy on the issue, as it would mean Japan can send military aid to help the US and South Korea in case of a contingency on the Korean peninsula. The motive behind Pyongyang's overture to Tokyo is naturally questioned.
기본적으로 북한도 그 일본의 제국주의 침략으로 피해를 봤던 나라이기 때문에 일본이 집단 자위권 행사를 하는 데 대해서는 이제 불편할 수밖에 없을 것입니다. 그럼에도 불구하고 최근에 북중 관계가 안 좋아지고 남북한 관계도 상당히 이제 그 진전이 없는 상태에서 이 중국과 한국을 겨냥한 그런 압박의 차원이 있을 수 있겠고요. 북한이 핵실험이라든가 장거리 로켓 발사들을 통해서 국제사회로부터 고립되고 유엔의 경제 제재를 받으면서 이 상황에서 출로를 모색할 수밖에 없는데 일본을 선택했다라고 하는 그런 의미가 있을 수 있겠습니다.
일본 측은 공화국 측이 포괄적 조사를 위하여 특별조사위원회를 내오고 조사를 개시하는 시점에서 인적 왕래 규제를 해제하며
Soon after the working-level talks in Beijing, Japan announced that it was lifting a number of sanctions on North Korea.
사실 이제 북한이 핵무기 개발이라든가 장거리 로켓 발사 등으로 인해서 유엔의 대북 제재를 받고 있습니다만 이와 별도로 일본은 이제 2006년부터 북한의 1차 핵실험 이후에 독자적인 대북 제재를 실행해 왔습니다.
While announcing the actions after North Korea decided to set up a special investigative committee on Japanese abductees, Japanese Prime Minister Abe said the easing of sanctions would be only a start and that he would aim for complete resolution of the issue.
일본이 문제를 조사하기 위해서 나름대로 책임 있는 그런 기관과 인물들로 위원회 구성을 발표를 했고요. 이와 동시에 이제 일본은 그동안 이제 북한에 대해서 인적 교류를 제한하거나 또는 조총련이 북한에 어떤 송금하는 그런 것을 이제 의무화했던 것을 이제 해제하고 특히 이제 인도적 목적을 가진 이 선박이 일본에 입항할 수 있는 그런 그 조치들을 취함으로 해서 북일 간의 새로운 어떤 그 교류 또는 조총련의 북한에 대한 뭐 재정적인 지원이라든지 또는 왕래할 수 있는 그런 그 길을 터놓았다 이렇게 봅니다.
It is too early to predict whether the thawed relations and partially eased sanctions could lead to full normalization of ties between North Korea and Japan.
북한의 입장에서도 만약에 북일 관계가 정상화되고 교섭이 활발하게 되면은 결국은 이것이 장기적으로는 자유주의 물결이 일본을 통해서 들어오게 되는 것이 되고 따라서 김정은 독재 체제로서는 이러한 상황을 고려할 때 쉽사리 일본에게 북한의 국교를 열어서 문을 여는 그런 일을 하는 것이 사실 부담스러운 것은 사실인 것이죠.
Even with improved relationship with Japan, North Korea cannot be accepted as a part of the regional and international community as long as it threatens global peace and security with nuclear weapons.
과거에도 납북자 문제에서는 핵 문제가 대화의 중단 요인이 됐기 때문에 북일 간의 이러한 접촉은 역시 북한 핵 문제라는 걸림돌이 있기 때문에 과정상에 상당히 진통이 예상되거나 계속 북일 수교로까지 이어질 가능성은 다소 낮을 수도 있다고 볼 수 있겠습니다.
Unless North Korea persuades the international community it is done with nuclear weapons program and Japan grows out of imperialistic habits, the two countries won't be able to fully mend ties even after a breakthrough in the abduction issue.
That's all for Bizline this week. Next week, we'll take a look at Korean companies that are acquiring foreign brands and ask ourselves what they're doing to improve their values. We'll also venture into the world of computer graphics and look at the latest technologies. Join us next week for plenty of more business stories. This is Jeff Kane for Bizline. Thanks for joining us.